Lagos is a very misunderstood place. It's tremendously cacophonous and seems tremendously crazy when you first get there. But there's a lot of patterns there that are created by the people themselves, not architectural patterns like everyone else has been talking about in the conference so far, but more just people-generated patterns of economy, markets. Lagos is, to me, the largest open-air market in the world. And I'll describe some of that by going backwards through the video and explaining who some of the people were. So the last guy, the kind of smiling guy who said there was no reason to pay the government anything and that he takes money from the transport. He was dressed in a sort of green and white uniform. He's what's called an agbero. And the agbero are people who literally extort money from the buses as they come by the major bus stops. And when you first see it, you think this is this amazing piece of criminality where this guy just stands there and every conductor who comes by has to pay him 20 or 30 naira, which is about 20 or 25 cents. There are so many buses. I mean, there's close to 100,000 buses in Lagos. So these guys are making big, big, big money. This guy told me that he made 10,000 naira a day, which is about $85 a day, which is pretty big money for a guy who stands on the street corner. But in reality, he's a member of the National Union of Road Transport Workers, as are the conductor of the bus and the driver of the bus. And what this is an amazing, huge, self-regulated, informal economy. The government, back in the late 70s and early 80s, got out of the business of providing mass transportation for its people. And the mass transportation system was maintained by the National Union. And the National Union essentially runs these buses as, in part, this giant Ponzi scheme where they're sort of taking money from themselves and recirculating the money among themselves. But at the same time, all the buses are running. They're falling apart, but there are actually designated routes, and they go where they're supposed to go, and the conductors charge generally what they're supposed to charge. So it's this amazing self-regulated system that is keeping mass transit going in Lagos and is, in fact, keeping Lagos going because there's no other, unless you have a private car, there's no other way of traveling around the city. There's no subway, there's no other form of mass transportation, so everyone has to take the bus. Rolling back a step, there was a very dusty sort of landscape in the garbage dump, which is in a neighborhood called Ojota, where I was interviewing two scrap dealers, Andrew Saboru and Fatai Konrumi. And Andrew is a really interesting story because Andrew has been working in that garbage dump since 1988. He started off as a teenager as a scavenger, going through all the materials at the dump and picking out the materials that he felt could be recycled and selling those materials. And he worked as a scavenger for 12 years and saved enough money to move up a notch in the informal pecking order of the dump, and he became a scaler. And that's the person who weighs the scrap material that the scavengers bring around and tells them how much money they're going to get, and then transfers that to a scrap dealer. And now, within the past year, Andrew has saved enough money to move up another notch, and he's now a broker himself. So he's the guy that goes around and buys from all the other scavengers. And to do this, Andrew developed a working capital of around 100,000 naira, which is somewhere between $700 and $800. And every month he can invest 100,000 naira and he makes 120,000 naira. So he makes a 20% profit every month, which is pretty good business. But what he's desperate for, totally desperate for, is a way of getting a loan. So he can increase his working capital, so he can make more money, so the scavengers can sell more, and so he can move up another notch in the pecking order. Now, going back even further, there was the sort of the guys stuffing plastic into a grinding machine and the women making soap. And those were The factory is owned by a fellow named Yomi Adibambo, and the two women who were making the soap, cutting the soap, were his two wives, Wake and Toyin Adibambo. And originally soap was his primary business. So he started out as a soap merchant, and what he was doing was selling the soaps on the buses, particularly long-distance buses in Lagos. But the bus drivers of the long-distance buses wanted a sort of payoff, and he got shut out of that business. So he's gone into the recycling business as well, and he's grinding up any kind of plastic slippers, plastic bags, whatever he can find, and selling that stuff. It's not a great business, but he's making some money, and he's invested in it. And finally, the young girl is Montserrat Aro. She's 13 years old. And she is what they call a pure water salesperson. Everywhere you go in Lagos, at all the major bus stops, you have these people carrying trays of bags of water on their head. Basically, that's how everyone in Lagos gets their drinking water. It's called pure water, but there's no guarantee that it's pure. They tend to buy it for about 1.5 naira per small water bag and sell it for 5 naira per small water bag. And Montserrat only works half a day because she goes to school the other half of the day. So she's making money for her school books. But there are people who do this every day, all day long, 11 hours a day. And they wind up making a tidy profit. They make about 700 naira a day, which is not a lot of money. I mean, it's around $5. But in terms of Nigeria, it's huge. It's double the minimum wage in the country. And that's about the sort of lowest, most horrible informal job that you can have, and the hardest, because you got to go running around, but you're making twice the minimum wage of the country.